Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our beloved Center Director, Dr. Mahalaya V. Rabado. Ma'am.
To our distinguished speaker, Secretary Arsenio Balisacan, who is my former professor, my boss, and now my colleague as we continue to collaboratively work on several projects, policy paper at least. Officials and colleagues here at INNOTECH, partners and colleagues in education, and to all participants online and in person in the Philippines and abroad, good afternoon, magandang hapon sa ating lahat, and welcome to INNOTECH. Today's seminar comes at a significant moment. The Philippine economy grew by 4.4% in 2025, while inflation averaged 1.7% for the same year. More recently, however, inflation has picked up, reaching 4.1% in March 2026. At the same time, the unemployment rate improved to 5.1% in February 2026, down from 5.8% in January. These are encouraging signs, if I may say, but they also remind us that growth must be felt in people's daily lives. It must be sustained, broadened, and translated into meaningful opportunities. This challenge is made more complex, as we are aware, by rising global uncertainty, including geopolitical tensions that continue to affect energy, food prices, and financial conditions. At home, domestic risk and structural constraints also persist. That is why today's theme, Rewiring Philippine Growth and Uncertainty, People, Innovation, and Shared Prosperity, is both timely and relevant. It calls our attention to a central challenge of our time. How do we continue building an economy that is not only growing but also resilient in the face of uncertainty, innovative in its approach, and inclusive in its outcomes? In this context, we are honored to have with us one of the country's foremost voices in economic policy and development planning, Secretary Arsenio Balisacan, who leads the Department of Economy, Planning, and Development, or DEPDev, formerly NEDA, the government's primary arm for economic policy, planning, coordination, and monitoring. His leadership is especially important as the country advances key reforms such as the Philippine Innovation Act, which seeks to strengthen the national innovation system and enhance productivity, competitiveness, and inclusive growth. In this effort, DEPDev, building on the mandate of its former name, NEDA, plays a central role in aligning innovation with long-term development priorities and ensuring that investments in science, technology, and human capital translate into sustained and broad-based economic progress. As a regional center of SIMIO, or the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization, and an international organization committed to educational innovation and human capital development, INNOTECH values conversation like this one. We are pleased to join the Philippines in celebrating Innovation Week, which will happen next week. And senior centers, INNOTECH, together with our sister centers, CIRCA and TropMed, will be part of the celebration next week at Manila Hotel. We reaffirm our support for the country's innovation agenda. We recognize that economic and educational transformation are deeply interconnected. Sustained growth depends not only on capital, infrastructure, natural resources, but equally on the quality of human capital, the strength of institutions, and the inclusiveness of opportunities. We are therefore privileged to hear from Secretary Balisacan as he shares his insights on how the Philippines can move forward amid uncertainty while advancing a development agenda anchored on people, innovation, and shared prosperity. So together, let's keep driving innovation in education and building a better future for all Filipinos. Muli, magandang hapon sa ating lahat.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce our distinguished guest speaker, the Honorable Secretary of the Department of Economy and Planning and Development, Dr. Arsenio M. Balisacan.
Good afternoon. and thank you for Director Ravago for the invitation to join me here and share some perspective, thoughts on the Philippine economy, particularly on the role of innovation and technology. Since I'm on the grounds of INNOTECH, I have to focus on my talk on innovation and technology. So let me start with some stylized facts, which I believe many of you have heard before. It's a long-term look at the uh, all right. It's a long-term look at the Philippine economy in relation to uh, other developing economies. And what I would like to highlight here is uh, that column B, comparing 1980 and 2005, which is about 25 years of development. And we look at one comprehensive measure of that indicator of development, this GDP, gross domestic product per capita, is a measure of the society's income adjusted for population. And what you would see is that comparatively, the Philippines has is, has the per capita income of the country increased only modestly during that period, only 10% higher than it is uh, for 25 years, no? As compared to many of the other countries in our region, their income per capita doubled. Many countries like Thailand tripled. Uh, we don't have yet data, comparable data for Vietnam the period, but for all developing and emerging economies, that's 1.4. And of course, even for countries like South Asia, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, you'd find them growing quite rapidly. So that 25-year period, which has been very well studied by many economists, including economic historians, on why the Philippines lag behind these countries during this period. That's to, because I don't look at what happened in the last 50 years, but I tried to slice that period into two sub periods. And so in the next one, I compare CB as column C 2024, that's the latest comparable data we have, and B 2005, so almost another 25 years, right? Or 20 years. No? Uh, so, and what you see is that you see the Philippines doing now much better than during the previous 25 years. No? 1.9%, 90% higher per capita income compared to what it was in 2005. And if you look at the performance of the Philippines, it's not, it has more or less joined the ranks of, at least for that period in terms of growth, of countries like Thailand, Indonesia, not too far away, no? Uh, and Malaysia. So during that period, you see the countries joining the ranks of these fast growing countries in our region, finally. And of course, Vietnam is a major leader. Uh, but compared to the average for developing and emerging economies in the world, uh, it was only 1.3. The country was doing better than the average for all developing and emerging economies. So something happened, as I will point out later, during that last 15 or so years, no? uh, or 2 decades. So what this slide shows us that rapid growth experienced by countries like China and all the major developing economies translated into into improvement in well-being, uh, in terms of reduction in poverty. In fact, you can see that for the East Asia and Pacific countries, is the light blue line here. You see poverty decreasing sharply during this period of rapid growth. And you see the same for, of course, this is China. China is a miracle by any measure in terms of its ability to reduce not only poverty in China, but global poverty because of its sheer size. And the number of poor people graduating from poverty. This is the Philippines. As you can see, its poor performance in economic growth in the earlier decades, also translated into poor performance in poverty reduction. So you can see the very strong link between economic growth sustained over a long period of time and and poverty reduction. Now, poverty or income poverty for that uh, regard is just one measure of one dimension of poverty, But you can look at other dimensions of well-being, like life expectancy, which is more or less a kind an indicator of the state of health of an economy. And you look at the life expectancy at birth, uh, and what happened in the Philippines. It improved. The life expectancy improved from 62 roughly to 70, but you could see that all these other countries around it were growing rapidly, with much more had sharper improvements in their life expectancy. So Filipinos live a shorter, have shorter lives compared to our neighbors, simply because we have done well in getting the economy create prosperity that can be shared by the society in large. And you can also look at that other measure of well-being, mortality rate, particularly children, infants. High rates of mortality uh, in the Philippines compared to our neighbors. Thailand, for example, has only uh, eight babies, infants per 1,000 live births, whereas the Philippines had 22. Uh, so, in other words, if you look at all these possible broad measures of development, you find that this poor economic performance of the economy in those 50 years have contributed to this. But you see some ray of hope in the last 15 years or so, in the last 2 decades, or more. And that's what I would like to focus on. How do we sustain this this these developments? We all have we have a vision for the Philippines uh, during the time of Ninoy Aquino administration, to, from 2010 to 2016. Uh, we developed a vision we call Ambition Natin 2040, which fortunately enough was carried over, adopted by the next administration, the Duterte administration, and today it's also guiding the Philippine Development Plan. So, uh, but of course, there have been many changes later, like COVID. Now we have this geopolitical tension in the Middle East. We need to revisit a Vision Natin 2040. Uh, and so these are the things that we would want. If we succeed in sustaining the momentum that we saw earlier, the last 15 years, then we should see all this desirable future that our people have expressed in when they were asked throughout the country. We did a nationwide consultations, surveys, when they asked what they aspire for themselves, for their family, for their country. Uh, for their communities. And this is what they said. They wanted a matatag, a strong family and community ties. They wanted a life that's comfortable, uh, no poverty, decent, decent transport, decent, with access to to health, to education, etc. And of course, a secure future, meaning uh, uh, they they would feel secure because their community has peace and order. They would feel secure as they live a long life because they have social protection, they have insurance. Uh, that's the kind of future that Filipinos want. And so, as we map our and think about the possibilities, the future, particularly the role of innovation, the role of technology, these are the future we don't want. Masakuna, distress, so much, yes, so many disasters, but and those disasters creating stress. It's okay if those disasters are temporary, but if their effects linger and put us down, then that's not uh, desirable. Mabagal, we are slow to adapt to technologies, we are slow to to uh, to grow. We are slow to address this stress and the needs of the community, of the country, and our families. And we see inequalities, not just income, but also inequalities and access to services, including digital connectivity, for example. So, so for the rest of this discussion of my presentation, I'd like to talk about innovation and its role in driving economic development, so that we achieve the desirable future that I mentioned. And I will come back to that Philippine development's narrative that I showed earlier, the last 15 or so years. And then I'll outline the building blocks for innovation and shared prosperity. All right, so let me start with some concepts for, I suppose it's not new for people at the INNOTECH, but I venture anyway to define what innovation is and what that means operationally. In For our purposes, I will simply define innovation as a process of introducing something new with economic value, generating value, generating economic value. So that's the key word. Yeah, it's a process that generate a new process that generates economic value. And there are two aspects somehow somewhat overlapping, but I did not present them as such. But there are two aspects of that, or feature are uh, components of that. One is addressing the needs, the current needs, uh, and this could be along the future that we do not want, that I presented earlier. The distressful, the masakuna, mabagal, at saka yung walang security. Those are, we want the reverse of that, of the opposite of those, right? So we want innovation to be addressing those needs, and it's improving what society already does. This is about addressing scarcity. This is about optimizing processes and reducing constraints to growth. And the other aspect of that is creating new possibilities. These are the expanding what societies can do. The earlier one is improving what society currently needs. The other one is expanding further, the possibilities, so that we can, and that is associated with new products, new processes, uh, perhaps new industries, and perhaps even new markets, generating new markets, creating new markets for uh, out of the use of knowledge and technology. All right. So that's what and in economics, for students in economics, we have a simple way of characterizing that, what we call the production possibility frontier. Here, uh, I assume that there are only two goods in the economy, agriculture and industry, services, and other goods there. No? And this production possibility frontier summarizes the maximum output that you can achieve with the country's natural resources, labor, capital, and the state of knowledge. And it's of course and its possibilities given by its institutions. So these are so we say that the economy is efficiently operating if the economy is anywhere in the curve. Now, the Philippine economy in those 3 decades that I described earlier is those 3 decades represent an economy where you are here. So if you are here, the economy is characterized as inefficiently operating economy, inefficiently organized operating economy, and therefore is underutilizing its resources. It's not utilizing its available labor, its capital, the land, the natural resources, the environment, uh, the skills of its people not being utilized properly. They are being utilized inefficiently. That is reflected in our statistics. That is reflected as high unemployment rate, high underemployment rate, mismatch of labor, mismatch of skills, where the highly educated is working in a low rewarding pursuit, right? So they are underemployed or there's mismatch between where they are working and the level of their education. I suppose at INNOTECH there's no mismatch. Uh, you're probably uh, okay. So there is an improvement in the way we organize our economy if we can move our economy from A to a point close to B or to B. And you see that as growth. When you see our economic statistics, GDP growth, uh, higher decrease in unemployment rate, decrease in underemployment rate. We see also, but the question is, how do you get rid of move there, right? And there are things that we represent the move from A to B as efficiency gains, and you can achieve that because you can improve logistics and infrastructure, for example. These are bottlenecks. We know that those are bottlenecks in the country, right? We have poorly provided infrastructure, inadequate infrastructure, and so you are underutilizing. And but if you can prove that, you go to B. You reduce red tapes, you reduce delays, you reduce corruption, because corruption takes away resources from what otherwise would be a productive deployment of those resources. And so therefore, when you have so much corruption, the economy will be inside the frontier. And it means it's translated into lower growth, lower income, lower employment, poorer quality of employment, and so on. So these are the things that you need to do: stronger governance, less corruption, better job matching and labor utilization. This will improve efficiency. But the other one is, when you have reached this point already, how do you continue growing? All right? You can continue to grow even if you have already reached this maximum combination of possibilities. If you are able to um, to innovate. If you are able to bring in uh, capital from foreign investment, for example, so that you remember that we draw this on the basis of given capital. So if you can bring in foreign investment, that essentially expands your possibilities. So these are the things, innovation and technology adoption. So it's true with technologies. There are production possibilities that are more advanced, for example, outside the country. And when you open the possibilities for these technologies to be adapted here in the Philippines, that effectively shifts our possibilities outward. And that means growth, that means uh, higher productivity for labor and so on. No? And so education and workforce skills development is another one. You improve skills, you improve upskilling and reskilling of our population would translate into shifting of that curve outward. Okay. We discover new resources like malampaya, for example, new natural gas that shifts the curve outward. Of course, I would like to emphasize here strong institutions. Strong institutions that lead to rule of law, you know, more accountability, more transparency, more predictability in our policy environment. Those encourage investment. Those would encourage innovation, and those would effectively shift that frontier outward. So that's where innovation and technology uh, comes in. And that's where your role at INNOTECH, to the extent that you are pushing for innovation and appropriate role and use of technology, like technology adoption, are effectively helping the economy move the frontier outside, allowing uh, possibilities for sustained growth and shared prosperity. So, so with that, I will now go over some of the recent developments, and here again you see that we go back as far as 1960 to 2024, and we use now the GDP per capita. Or, um, these are in real terms, meaning the effects of inflation have been taken away, so that we're comparing apple for apple. Uh, so you can see that during this from 60 to all the way to like 2005, 2000, around 2000, you see that the increases in our GDP per capita were so slow, whereas somewhere 2005, 2008, you find that uh, that growth now faster. If we did not have this sharp dip in 2020, we probably are not so far away from Vietnam, because that separates us from Vietnam, because they did not have a sharp decrease in a sharp contraction of the economy in 2020 that we had. So another way of looking at that is if you place everybody's income in 2010, starting from zero, and then map how they perform over time up to 2024 of the FI data, you find that whereas the characterization of the Philippines before this period was that the Philippines was a laggard, the Philippines was a sick man of Asia, the Philippines was always characterized as the bottom of the Southeast Asian uh, uh, economic performance. But again, as I said, that has changed quite a bit. You see that now that as I said, if not for the COVID, we probably did not. And I mean, our response to the COVID, just to make sure, no? Our response to the COVID uh, o- uh, led to a sharp contraction because we instituted long mobility restrictions, extremely long compared to what was employed in many other, in most countries. And it was so deep, so intense control. And so that hurt so much the Philippine economy. That was not the kind of measures that Indonesia or Vietnam did. They were more strategic in the control of the COVID, and so they were able to prevent sharp contraction of their economy. But nonetheless, we remain to be somewhere. You know, it's not, we're not we haven't gone back to the description of Sigma of Asia. In fact, we continue to lead uh, with Vietnam as the leading country in the region. So that is what I am referring to as growth momentum that we need to sustain. And now it's of course it's a big challenge given all these constraints that we are facing with the Middle East crisis and with the uh, high debt that started to pile up and was accumulated during this period. Despite the huge debt that we accumulated to respond to the COVID, we are not able to prevent a sharp reduction of the economy. So we ended up, but when this new administration came in, with a huge pile of debt, so uh, it was a challenge, but we needed to to uh, to institute measures to ensure uh, that the achievements in the past would not be completely eroded. So we had to go through a particular fiscal consolidation program, manage the deficit in ways in ways that would not compromise the welfare of particularly the very vulnerable poor. No? Is continuing to challenge as we were trying to recover from the infrastructures uh, controversy. Then we were hit by another shock, no? And of course that is quite a challenging situation. But I think that as the response so far is um, is managed the what is that is good. We are still able to maintain and ensure that we don't we don't use measures that will make the adjustment even after the crisis in the Middle East hard to do, no? Or uh, we would not want to, or the last thing that we would want to do is we address this crisis, but addressing the needs of the economy, the needs of our people in the coming years would be much more difficult because you have so much debt and other issues. No? So it's managing today and managing tomorrow. That's a that's the complex nature of policy making for a country like us. Okay, so I think I'm going to go faster. So, all right, from now on. So now, while I said that the momentum has picked up in the last 20 or so years uh, in the Philippine economy, I, we would like to note that much of that growth is coming from the traditional inputs, factors of production. And capital accumulation is one of those factors of production. And you can see here that uh, if you compare our performance with the other countries, we see that this is the case of the Philippines, the red one. This is the contribution of capital to capital accumulation, which is investment. Uh, and you see that that for the Philippines, the growth that we are seeing was accompanied by this capital accumulation, and that's the single most important contributor to the growth. Now, ideally, you would want a combination. For a country like us, we would want to see these factors of production is still contributing. For after all, our population is increasing. We would want to expand our infrastructure, and that's investment. So investment is still going to be a major, and as well as labor is going to be still a major contributor of growth. But we also would want to see efficiency coming in, and uh, uh, the contributions of innovations coming in. What we call the total factor productivity in our language. No? Things that could be the sources of growth coming from better adoption of improved technologies and innovative processes. No? And I think that I have some data to show what happens to those TFPs later. But that's what you can see there. There is still space. The other problem for the economy is that obvious that while saw capital accumulation contributing most to the growth of the economy, the the capital per labor, the amount of capital that you would want to lift up labor productivity is simply not enough. And in fact, what that means is if you look at the capital stock per worker, which is an indication of how extensive uh, is investment in the country. You can see that, and therefore, the thing here is the reason that's important is if you want to create quality jobs, if you want to create um, high levels of productivity for labor, you have to have investment. You have to, and usually these are two complementary things. If you improve if capital stock through investment increases, then productivity of labor will rise. And if labor productivity will not rise, of course, don't expect wages to rise. All right, that's another issue there. And the reason why wages are so slow in rising in the Philippines is simply because if you look at the capital stock per worker, it's very low. It's been stagnant. This red line compared to countries like Malaysia, for example. Um, so that's why our focus in recent years have been to try as much as possible to make the country attractive for investment. Um, that's the big hurdle. If we can get those investments coming in, how can we improve the welfare of workers? How can we reduce underemployment? How can we reduce unemployment? You need these complementary factors of production. Now, this is the productivity growth that I was referring to. The productivity growth is again is coming from improvement in technology, improvement, advances in innovation, right, in processes and not just in technology. And you can see that the growth for the Philippines has been quite low compared, although improving, but not as much as you see, in the case of say Indonesia or Vietnam. So we really need to do a lot more in terms of improving our ecosystem for innovation. So what that says is there's quite little going on in terms of actual innovation and technological progress, at least in relation to countries like Vietnam and Philippines. And that's the reason why we had to come up with, the Congress had to come up with the Innovation Act to address some of these bottlenecks in the uh, innovation ecosystem. All right. Here is even more remarkable. This is the total factor productivity when uh, when we index them to 2021. So the level of productivity of Korea continues to grow as it develops. In 1960, you see consistent growth of productivity. Of course, the TFP of Korea is higher than the Philippines, but the numbers are computed in relation to the 2021 numbers. So that's how it looks. But the point that we want to make, we are making here is sustained progress in technological and progress and innovation, bringing, whereas in the Philippines, flat for a long time, even stagnated, drop, and then very slow recovery. So this is a major challenge to get to that expansion of the possibility frontier that I mentioned earlier. You've got to get your innovation. You get to have your technological progress. You get to have your capital accumulation um, uh, coming in. And most of the time, the technology, the advances in know-how are reflected in the technology that in the capital that you import. For example, your computer, right? It's the same computer as you had 10 years ago, but the most current computer is more advanced in terms of so that's embodied technology. And that has to continue uh, uh, improving. So again, the modernization, the rapid industrialization of Korea was accompanied by rapid TFP improvement. Uh, and we would want to see that as a feature of the long-term development of the Philippines. Now, this this is quite well known that as a country develops, its ability to innovate improves. In fact, if you do a uh, there is a publication called Global Innovation Report, and it produces an index of what that global innovation a summary of the extent of global of innovation in its country, no? Uh, and and if you plot those countries and draw a line, you find this, this is the average line that pertain to all these countries, which shows that as country develops, meaning as their income per capita increases, their ability to innovate increases. So there's no causality there, but the causality goes two way. But what is the simply saying is that, well, um, it's expected that developed countries tend to innovate uh, more than uh, developing countries. But what is surprising, what is encouraging here is that when you look at the Philippines, it's up there, no? And this is India, the big one here. China is over there, the big size. I just said for the population. And but what is encouraging to note is that the Philippines is above the average curve, above the line, which means that at its given its per capita income level, it's actually doing better than the average for its peers. Because otherwise, the average for its peers over here, right around here. But so it's encouraging, and I think that if we can sustain that, we should be able to do better in the coming years in terms of sustaining rapid growth. So, and if if you unbundle the index, you find all these numbers. What is it in high tech manufacturing, or what's contributed by high tech exports, what's patents applications, it's an index of the kind of intensity of innovation in the country. Uh, we are not that bad compared to many of the countries in our region. Uh, what we are falling behind are, I think this is what we see the university money, not, there's scientific and technical articles. We are not really doing well compared to to countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, and China. But there is a good correlation between achievements in these areas and their ability and the country's ability to innovate and to adapt advanced processes and advanced technologies. So that's very important to look at those. Now, so I kept saying that we need to sustain the momentum uh, to and developing innovation capabilities is key to that. But there are um, stages, no? In the early when the level of development is as low as currently for the Philippines, the best we could do are improving our production capabilities. And what that means in my earlier production possibility curve is you are inside the curve, you improve our production capabilities to get closer to the frontier, and and as our ability to adapt technologies improve, um, more advanced technologies than what we currently are able to absorb, then we are shifting the frontier outward, and that's what it's the next step. And I think that we are in the where we are is, in this interface. Invention capabilities is a bigger hurdle, um, but we'll get there eventually. But yeah, the most basic part and where the opportunities are in terms of you know for employment and for uh, shared prosperity. We can focus your resources here, particularly in technology adoption. I think we can do a good job. Um, okay, so let me now focus on these building blocks for innovation. I think these are well known to the INNOTECH community, but I want to emphasize here the key ingredients, to for innovation to prosper, and also that for those innovations to translate into shared prosperity. Uh, First, of course, is the human capital, or the skilled workforce. Building that up is key, and I will show some indication of where we are. Uh, Efficient infrastructure, including, for example, energy and digital connectivity, uh, is key. Logistics, enabling governance, uh, we are challenged here, enormous challenge here that we need to work on, keep beating on, uh, and of course, I used to don't, I used to be a one of those doubters of industrial policy, but my view has changed so much since then. I really think that you need a good public-private partnership, and that is tantamount to a good industrial policy that we need to be thinking about. I think there's so much left behind in the thinking, and we need to be to start seriously the conversation, especially between academia and government. I think because there is it's not so much between government and the private sector. It's the intellectual uh, um, underpinning, of this has to be understood so well, especially in the context of a country like the Philippines, where institutions and governance issues are often raised. But I think we have gone that stage already, and we just need to uh, move further. So, and now, let me discuss the building blocks and focus on the ones that are more relevant for INNOTECH. One, of course, as I said already, human capital is linked to higher income and greater innovation. And again, you can see this here, see it here, no? The index of human capital, the summary of the state of the human capital in the country, human capital index, and the GDP of the country is, you can see it's quite correlated. We, quite a nice fit there. Uh, and you can also see the relationship between the growth of the economy and the state of its human capital as proxied by literacy rate, for example, or the patterns. This one is quite interesting to me. Um, this is from a recent World Bank study. I'm still trying to understand what they find, but um, it's what the study shows for the Philippines. There's a big gap. There's a wide gap between the earnings of those post-secondary workers who are in or who have access or who are in digital connectivity intensive sectors versus those who are not. So uh, what's interesting is for those workers who have that working in those sectors with high digital connectivity, uh, the difference in the earnings is uh, is quite high, you know? And but those differences would not be too high if the level of connectivity is already so well spread, as in the case, for example, of Indonesia and Vietnam. So you don't see that across sectors, you don't see much difference in earnings and average earnings as supposed to be in the case of the Philippines. So, and this only tells us that all this inequity in access to digital connectivity like internet is a cause for those differences in opportunities in earnings, right? And that's quite clear here. So that is one. Here again, still I'm on the first building block, human capital. What's interesting here is that if you look at the spending on education and spending on health, these are inputs to human capital development, right? Um, the Philippines is broadly comparable to its neighbors when you see their spending as percent of GDP, right? But when you see the outcomes, they're quite different. For example, you see here that the schooling, the the learning associated with a particular year of schooling is very low in the Philippines compared to the other countries, right? So, and yet, as a proportion of their GDP, you find that broadly comparable spending. So what that means is it's not just the spending, it's the quality of that spending. Where you're spending it is what also matters. No? And I think that's very clear in this in this graph. Uh, Now here you'll find also very high level of functional literacy rates. No? Um, the basic literacy rates and the functional literacy rates, even for those who are supposedly in the postgraduate age already, right? Like, and 20, 20, 25 to 30 still find a very high rate of functional literacy. So again, there is, in terms of the level of spending as a proportion of the GDP of these countries, the Philippines broadly comparable, right? But the outcomes are quite different. Mean that we need to do much more uh, than just simply spending. And so I think that the reforms that they are doing now at DEPDev, at Department of Health, are actually meant to improve the quality of the spending so that you can say better translation of the level of spending and learning outcomes. All right, here, these are global data, and what you find is the the challenge in terms of human capital development is now much stronger because of a very rapid technological change, especially in the context of AI. You know? So you have um, you need to transform the way we do things in terms of human capital development. And incidentally, these are global studies, no? So if you assume that the scenario in the near term or medium term is slow progress of AI, then this is what you expect. It's the status quo. No? But on the other hand, if you see rapid progress as what we are seeing now, then it changes everything. For example, what it takes many years to do a research would now take a few days to do. I spent many years in the academy doing research, and it terrifies me to go back to research, with this kind of technology. The same is true in problem solving. AI can outperform humans in many jobs. Um, the worst affected would be the poets, the novel, the literary people, where your AI can generate much better in a few seconds work of arts. They can be potential grandeur. Yeah, so it really changes the way we look at work and at and the way which various types of workers or types of employment are affected by this rapid development. However, at the same time, or the other point that I would like to note here is that because of these rapid changes, the skills that our workers possess can quickly get outdated, which really imposes a lot of pressure on our educational system. That all this upskilling and reskilling has to be a continuous process and must be quick because they get outdated quickly. Uh, so and then while AI is a threat, AI is also an opportunity for many workers. If you are able to provide that upskilling and reskilling, AI can become a tool that one can use for uh, for one's work. No? So and there are opportunities for that. No? We can look at high exposure to AI but low complementarity. Those have AI would not be a serious threat even if they are highly exposed. Services, of course, is one. All this uh, uh, hotel services, restaurants, or even your healthcare services. You still prefer a human to be massaging you rather than a robot, right? So those kind of things, the service, healthcare in particular, I think you still would want a real nurse or a real dentist to be doing the dental work rather than a machine. Uh, so those kind of things, you have high exposure to AI, but low complementarity. But there are cases where low complement, this high complementarity uh, here is for the services, but because the low exposure for agriculture, I think that AI is not likely to affect much of agriculture, but industry is uh, yeah. All right. Anyway, these are also the cases here for. I think those the ones threatened are those professionals, certain professionals, clerical support. Uh, all right. Now let me shift to infrastructure as one of the another building block, and I emphasize here digital because that's essentially what has been a critical constraint to adoption of technologies, particularly AI. No? So, and what we find here are indicators of access and why in the Philippines um, you have very high, low level of access compared to other countries and our neighbors. While the speed is so low, and therefore we're talking about AI that requires speed and capacity, and more importantly, the cost of internet, broadband in particular, as a proportion of your income is quite high. It's quite high. Compared, for example, for Brunei, Vietnam. Vietnam, for example, it's very low as a proportion. It's the cost of accessing internet, broadband internet, is as a proportion of an average person's income. It's so low compared to what we have in the Philippines. Uh, Mobile broadband is the same story. The indicators show that we have poor access to internet, costly uh, internet services, and inaccessible. Even if it's expensive in many areas, it's inaccessible at all. there's simply no facility. And the cost is okay. So clearly, among the different infrastructure, digital connectivity is so paramount in addressing those issues. And here again, the diffusion of technology and what do you say, the government's readiness, government readiness. You know, actually, we're not so bad now with all these reforms that we have done and the laws that we have passed in recent years. Our readiness is up there. Is comparable. We are quite close to Malaysia and to Vietnam and Indonesia. So when it comes to to the global ranking, um, we are not so far away. Uh, but I think that we need to. It is the framework is there. The government readiness is there. It's the deployment. It's the investment, and these are massive investment that are required. And of course, a part of that. Okay, before I going there, so these are laying the groundwork for innovation enabling policy. Um, we have the policy environment. We have the enabling environment. We have even the document, the framework for strategy document for innovation, actually, and we have the uh, some guidance with respect to dealing with AI. No? So it's in terms of the um, infrastructure governance, the soft software. Uh, in terms of policy, we have those. What's missing or still lacking is um, the physical, the connectivity. So a game changer to address the digital connectivity, the access issue in particular, is the passage of this Konektadong Pinoy Act, the Internet Act that the president signed into law uh, 2 years ago. So we can the intention of this, or the objective of this law, is to make internet accessible, affordable, even in far-flung areas, and by opening up the sector to more competition. That's the key to opening up so that you should not only have two players in the market. The economy is the country is quite big. You can afford to have more players in the market, and it should be allowed to have a policy that allows that and prevent uh, any anti-competitive forces to uh, hinder the diffusion of digital technology. Okay, this is interesting because it does show that moving to I said, expanding the frontier and moving the economy closer to the frontier, and that when you have a competitive internet industry where entry is freer, where players can come in without being swallowed by the giant players, and therefore can offer anyone can offer better internet services, can actually come in without being uh, disadvantaged by public policy or any anti-competitive practices by the existing players. If you have that, then you would have uh, better outcomes for innovation. Here, industries are close to the frontier can actually see more innovation outcomes associated with the decrease in or associated with the increase in competition. But of course, as is all known, free competition is not also the ideal situation, because for public services like connectivity, digital infrastructure, you know, market size matters. Okay, here, I think that I said this already. This is another interesting here. I said earlier that we are challenged. Our challenge is make the country a very attractive place for investment. And we can see here, this is quite interesting. This is the Philippines in that period, average 1995 to 2004. Uh, Quite low, no? Low level of FDIs. Remember the FDIs that I mentioned earlier? Those FDIs, to the extent that they come in with new technologies and we adapt to those technologies, will shift the frontier outward. That's what deliver sustain economic growth, that deliver higher productivity, and should result in higher wages, higher incomes eventually. Now, um, by this period, average of this period, while there was improvement, it's quite still modest, no? And we can see the other countries were performing. But what's encouraging to me is that during this period, 2015 to 2024, we actually now see a much better investment outcomes than what we had. So in relation to our past, we are doing well. No? But in relation to our neighbor, well, we are not so bad, but still, of course, these are Vietnam and Indonesia, um, still the leading players. But to the extent that I think that if you can, again, the issue that I kept repeating here is keeping that momentum. And see, you have some momentum here. We just need to build on that so that we can keep that growing. Again, we have, of course, at this time, we are challenged, but we hope that these are just temporary. Uh, so this is essentially how I will end my presentation. That we are building a future ready, competitive and inclusive economy. But this requires reinforcing our growth pillars, including equipping our workforce and establishing a supportive policy environment for innovation and shared prosperity. Thank you.